the Breaking Down Biology blog Q&A session. My name is Soham Ray, and today I'm joined by UCSF scientist Dr. Leila Mohammadi, the lead author, and Dr. Matt Springer, the corresponding author of their paper, which investigates the impact of chronic cannabis use on human vascular health. Great to have you both here today.
Good to be here.
Thank you for having us.
So my first question for you both is about putting your research into context. How did you approach your research on cannabis, and what were your findings?
First of all, in my lab, we had initially been studying marijuana smoke in a rat model where we take rats that have never been exposed to it. We saw that the marijuana smoke would impair endothelial function whether or not it had cannabinoids. So we were able to get cannabis from which all the cannabinoids had been chemically extracted. And when we used smoke from that versus smoke from regular cannabis, it had the same effect. So the THC was not required for the impairment of endothelial function, which makes sense because tobacco smoke also impairs endothelial function, and there's no THC in tobacco smoke, right? So this all makes sense. So that was sort of my bias going into this, was looking at the oral THC as a negative control because, well, we know THC isn't required. So if the smoke from cannabis is impairing endothelial function, then presumably we can show that it was the smoke and not the THC by including an edible THC group. I think Leila was definitely right on the money there because she, from the start, was not viewing that as a control group. And I kept on saying, I really think this is a control. And she kept on saying, I don't know. And so, of course, in the end, when I saw those results, it was like, oh my God, the THC results was obvious. So, I mean, when I said, now we got this sort of nuance, it's like, well, the smoke is associated with this, with this defect. And we're pretty sure that it's smoke related and doesn't require the THC, but gee whiz, the THC itself also has this effect. The thing is, as you saw in the paper, that we have reason to think that these two effects are happening in different ways by different mechanisms. So it's like if you're smoking cannabis, you're probably getting the effects of the smoke and maybe also the effects of the THC. I've seen this quote show up in various articles, but I think it's notable because it's true. The first thing I said to Leila was that as a scientist, scientifically, this is really interesting. And from a public health messaging standpoint, it totally screws it up.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's way easier to tell people to switch off to a healthier alternative than to say, don't use it at all. Right?
Yeah, that's actually a very interesting point you're bringing up because we had many, for our THC group, when we were recruiting, we have a big pool of people who reached out to us to participate in the study. They were edible users who quit smoking and wanted to be part of our study. And the reason they quit was that they thought it's a healthier option. However, we did not recruit them for our study. I have to emphasize on that. Those THC edible users in our study, they're pure THC edible users. They never smoked any tobacco or cannabis before, or they're not vaping. But that's very interesting that there were big number of potential study participants who were previous cannabis smokers.
In college, I've known people who are daily users and people who do it occasionally. Do you think this study can address the differences between those groups, or is that a whole nother study in itself?
We showed the more you smoke and the more the amount of edibles individuals take per week, they had significantly worse endothelial function. The same thing goes for those who smoke more joints per week.
But of course, because we have a dose response, if the more you use it, the worse you are. It follows that the less you use it, the better off you are. And if you take that down, there should be some point at which you can say, there's a moderate level of use, occasional use, that probably is not creating this issue. And people should just be aware of that as they do it, that there might be a risk. And the analogy that I always come back to is cheeseburgers because it works so well. I'm still happy to eat a cheeseburger every now and then, but I won't eat a cheeseburger every day because I know that they're bad for me. See what I mean? So it's a similar thing. People should just be aware of that.
Okay, yeah, great. Okay, so final question is, where does this research take you next in terms of studying cannabis use and its health impacts?
This is the real public policy question, right? If you're exposed frequently to marijuana secondhand smoke, is that similar to being exposed frequently to tobacco secondhand smoke? So in this study, the so-called Candide study for cannabis, does it damage endothelium? One of the groups, and one of the most important groups that we're recruiting, is people frequently exposed to secondhand smoke from marijuana. And it turns out that these people are kind of hard to find. Apparently in the Bay Area, cannabis smokers are much more polite and considerate than I had assumed they were. So it's been very, very hard to find these people.
For me, I would like to explore the pathways involved, specifically for THC edible users, because we have no knowledge on that. We can start from the cellular studies because in our lab we do a lots of cell culture studies that give us a little bit of more freedom to basically explore what pathways are affected. And there are a couple of other directions that we are actually working on some grant application. Stay tuned for hopefully get funded, and we'll have some data about that too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a great place to end. And to those who are listening, want to read the paper or read the blog about the paper in this interview, you can find that information in our bio. But thank you guys for your time.
All right.
Thank you
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. Nice chatting
Thank
with
you.
you.